Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people to combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive actions. Today's guest is Mindy Corporon. Mindy is an author, podcaster, and foundation founder whose life purpose changed from guiding people financially as a CEO of a successful wealth management firm to making her mission to gather people to shine a light on peace. Mindy is a founder of Faith Always Wins Foundation and the 7Days Make a Ripple, Change the World experience. She is a co-founder of Workplace Healing, LLC, and her podcast, Real Grief, Real Healing, offers her audiences the opportunity to hear from real people about their life-altering experiences and what steps they took and are taking to find healing. Her book, Healing a Shattered Soul, gives readers a look into her faithful journey of courageous kindness after the trauma and grief of domestic terrorism took the lives of her father and son. Mindy encourages and motivates audiences to overcome life's challenges one day at a time. So please welcome to the show, Mindy Corporon. Mindy, thank you again for being here, and I express my condolences for your losses. As we mentioned, I prefer not to go into details about that, but we'll ask you about your story. But it's the motivation and what you've grown from this experience that it really interests me, that I think people really need to understand, really need to hear. And that piece of literally the peace, P-I-E-C-E, of peace, P-E-A-C-E, I think is really important in our times now as well. So if you could tell us about you and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate what you do and that you're offering so much inspiration and encouragement from your podcasts and your website. Yes, so I will give a little bit of elaboration about what occurred because it was significant. I was living life with a husband who's my current husband, and we had two boys at the time who were 14 and 12, and this was in April of 2014. And my father took our oldest son, Reet Underwood, to a singing competition, and they were ambushed there. They were at a Jewish location. They were ambushed there by a white supremacist who had planned on murdering Jews that day. He had premeditated this plan of action, and he ambushed my dad as he exited the vehicle, and then he turned the gun on my son. My dad lost his life immediately, and then Reet died within the hour. And then the shooter had left the premises, and I always want to make sure that people understand that another woman lost her life as well at another Jewish location. Her name is Terry Lamano. And so the Lamano family and our family have always been linked together because of that. They're a beautiful family. All of us are Christian, and it's important that we're Christian, but it's also not important in the context, but people tend to want to understand how a Christian family was really taken to their knees at a Jewish location by a white supremacist. And it's because evil doesn't see color or faith or anything. Evil just blasts everyone that is in the way. And that is what happened to me and our family in April of 2014. And it changed the trajectory of my life significantly into finding peace, P-E-A-C-E.
And, it's, I don't want to say it's good, but in a way it is that, you're focusing on the peace, because that is such a traumatic event. That's an event that people will say, I couldn't get over that. I'm not saying you're over it or you're ever going to get over it by any means, but there's a value where you can help others. And I think that's what's so important, that people understand. Even in hard times, we grow, we learn, we become better. Can you help us to understand how you've done that?
Yes, I would be happy to. Initially, I felt as if I were in another world. I felt I was in another space and time. It was very floaty feeling, very foggy. That lasted, the floaty feeling and being in maybe another realm of our universe lasted for several months.
Wow.
And then the fogginess lasted for over a year. Mm-hmm. What I did was I said yes to help. I said yes to people, women, men, families I knew, families I didn't know, when they said they wanted to pray for me, when they said they wanted to hug me, as gifts arrived, as people wanted to purchase us food, I said yes. And that was very helpful to shoring up our family. The other thing I said yes to was I felt God's presence. And people could read for sure the entire story in Healing a Shattered Soul. But specifically, when I found my dad and son in the parking lot, which is a huge piece of what happened to me. And at the time I found them, I heard God speak to me. I heard the words, "Your Father's in heaven, go find Reet." And as I struggled later that day, and then months and even a year later, understanding that I heard these words and it was so powerful, I knew I needed to listen. My pastor told me that night when he and I spoke the night of the murders that, my heart was raw with emotion. And he said, the best advice I can give you is to keep listening to your heart. And I have done that, and I've stayed on that path. And so enter in then people wanting to help us. And as a society, when a tragedy happens to someone, we tend to all want to help in some way. And it's so important to share that prayer from far away helps. And then if you're close, paper products help. And food helps.
Right.
And taking my son to school helped, and walking my dog helped.
Right.
And what I've learned is that I said yes, and I accepted help, because these people came alongside us and they breathed life back into our family.
Wow. And that's a big piece that I hear from that, is the idea of listening. Any time of tragedy, I think that's important for us to listen, like you said, to the words of God, to what you need, to your heart. That listening is a big factor that we can grow from. And I think it sounds like this strengthened your faith. Is that correct?
It did strengthen my faith. So many people said the question, there were two specific questions. How are you so strong? And did you know your faith was this strong? And the answer to did I know my faith was that strong was no. I had no idea. It had never been tested to that extent, never. And I pray that it never will be tested. We had one other incident that happened along our journey of healing in the past 7 years. Our younger son, age 12 at the time, when his grandfather and brother were murdered, at the age of 13, and then again at the age of 14, became suicidal. And he was triggered with this deep sorrow and pain and suicidal thoughts as his birthday approached, because he had remorse for living. He wasn't on premise, he wasn't there, but he felt that he shouldn't be the one living, that he thought Reet should be the one living. And he struggled with that. And so my faith was really tested again then. I was so angry at God, and I allowed myself to be angry at God, because no one else could probably feel that wrath. I would harm another person if I gave them that much anger that I had. But God heard it and brought people alongside us, the professional people, counselors, friends, family. We enveloped anyone that looked like and felt like and was presented to us as people who would hold our hands on this course. So my faith was definitely not, I didn't know it was that strong, and it was tested, but I do believe in God. I also believe and have learned that other faiths, Islam and Judaism, Buddhism, I've learned about paganism. I've learned about a lot of faiths over the past 7 years, because this murderer wanted to murder Jews because of what he thought they did or believed. That pushed me into learning about faiths, and that helped me become stronger as my own faith. Now, respect all other faiths. I respect people that are atheist. I respect people that are agnostic. I want to learn from them. And I feel like we all as humans have so much to offer from the point of courageous kindness, which could be seen as a faith perspective or a human perspective. And I'm open to both of those.
That's a great point, because we're all human first. It doesn't matter your skin color. We all bleed red, and we're all people, and we want safety for our family. We want to live long times. We want, to make sure our family is taken care of. So that it goes across all realms. And I think you've definitely seen that. You've proven that. This person that did this didn't even understand. Like you said, it's that they just wipe out whatever's in their path. They don't even understand who that person is, what they are, no idea of who you were, what you are, what your background was, or anything. And the ability for you to take that and learn, like you said, the growth of other religions, other viewpoints. That's what we need to understand, I think, in our societies. Everybody's got a viewpoint, and we need to at least acknowledge that and try to understand it a little bit. And it sounds like you've done a great job doing that. One of the big questions, and you lead it into it a little bit, was the idea of bitterness. And that struck me because, your faith is totally tested in this scenario. Is there a bitterness, or was there a bitterness? I'm sure there probably was at the beginning, because you said you were a man of God. And how did that all shift?
Yes, I chose, and it is a choice. I chose forgiveness very early on without realizing it, and evidently that comes from maybe my experiences in life. I had lost a friend when I was 16 years old, so I had experienced a deep sadness prior to this. I had lost grandparents, so I had experienced those types of losses. I had seemingly no control over the fact that my dad and son were murdered. It wasn't like I was there and could stop it. I replayed over and over in my mind so many different scenarios how I could have kept it from happening. But that's kind of a separate point. But I think as a person involved and closely related to someone who's killed violently, you think, what could I have done? Are there any steps I could have done? But when I speak about forgiveness, and I want to elaborate here, I don't say, by saying that I forgive does not at all mean that I'm telling anyone that the murderer was right. Everything that he did was wrong. But the forgiveness is I don't carry the hate in my heart. Okay. I get angry.
Great clarification.
And I allow myself to be angry, but I also don't want to harm myself. And I don't want to harm other people. So I don't want to harm my husband or my son or my family members, my mom, who also lost her husband and her grandson. And so I personally would go to our church. I would go to what we call the Wesley Chapel. It's on the campus of Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, Kansas. And I went every Thursday for an entire year, every Thursday. And I would go there to cry. I would go there to find my dad and cry, and I would journal. So the other things that helped me process this anger and this disbelief and maybe the bitterness that you're talking about, first of all, I would write out every feeling and emotion I had, which helped to get it out of my system. And then as soon as I could walk to the mailbox again, I started walking more. And believe me, it took me a month to walk to the mailbox to just have enough energy to walk down the street. Right. But I had previously engaged in triathlons. Wow. And so there was a triathlon coming in July, and this happened in April, and I made it a goal. I felt my dad with me, and I felt him say to me, keep moving. And I didn't want to move, Bob. Right. I didn't want to move, but I had a son, and I had a business, and I had a husband and a mom. And so I had life to live. So I kept moving. So physically I moved, and that helps process toxins that are in our body. Right. I stayed away from alcohol. I like my occasional alcoholic beverage or a glass of wine, but I stayed away from that because that can numb you, and then you don't actually feel the feelings. So I do feel like when we feel anger, it's an important feeling to feel, but
Right.
to be cognizant about how long you feel it and how quickly or how you can process it. And then it's the same thing for sadness. I instruct people, I encourage people to feel the sadness. It's a real emotion that we have as humans. Animals have sadness.
Yeah.
You can see it when you watch an animal show and something happens to their
Yeah.
mate or their, or their child, and you can tell that they are sad. And what do? They cry out loud.
Right.
They may scratch at a tree, or they may dig up a hole, or that, so we want to do that. And
Right.
so I do the same things, and I recommend people do that to process those feelings out of our body and allow us to find joy, which we can find,
Yeah.
but it takes time, and
Yeah.
you want to be intentional about that.
And that's another good point, because yeah, none of this is something you're going to get over in a month, in 2 months. This is a long-term path that we will all take in times of tragedy. And learning that and applying that helps you build up that muscle to keep going. Like you said, the earth still moves, and the sun comes up every day, whether people are here or not, unfortunately. But that is what the world does. God created the world, so he's got a bigger plan. He's got a better plan than we do. And understanding that, it's interesting you say how you coach people through that. What are some ways you help people? What are some tactics, if you will, to help people get through one step at a time, because it is a journey?
Well, for sure. Thank you. For sure, one step at a time. You want to be okay with, give yourself permission to just take baby steps.
Yeah.
And if you can take a shower on day 2 and you didn't take a shower on day 1, then that's success. You took a shower. Okay. You got out of bed, you took a shower. That's great. And then maybe the next day, you can make your own, breakfast, and someone's not making it for you. I mean, it was literally baby steps. I felt like I had been hit by a Mack truck.
Right.
Physically, I was debilitated. I struggled to put on my own clothes. I struggled to eat. I didn't eat for 4 days until someone, finally said, you have to eat something. And then they fed me. She brought me shrimp, and my friend Kathy, and because she said, "What will you eat? Will you eat? What will you eat?" And I said, "I'll eat shrimp." So she brought me shrimp, like cocktail shrimp. And then she sat at the table and poked them in my mouth. So first, it is hard. It is hard. And one step at a time can be as simple as getting out of bed, and then taking the shower, and then having some food. And each day can be a little bit different. I would push myself through grief. I know that everyone cannot do that. I know that my mom did not push herself through grief, and really my husband didn't either. I think my son Lucas did. I think he pushed himself through grief. What I mean by that is I elected to go to the high school and clean out my son's locker. And my husband came with me. We went together, and I cried from beginning to end. So here's where I'll say to somebody, if they're in deep sorrow, cry.
Yeah.
Cry all you need. I didn't wear makeup for 2 years because I didn't know when I was going to cry. I cried in the grocery store. I cried in church. I cried at work. I cried at home a lot. I just cried. And sometimes in the beginning, that's an emotion that's so heavy, you don't even have control over stopping it.
Right.
And so don't stop it. Let it come out, because that will help cleanse, again, the toxins and the emotions that are in your body. So those are just a few of the things that I offer. I get ideas too, like you do probably from your podcast guests.
Oh, yeah.
I in my podcast, Real Grief, Real Healing, I interview people who had a significant trauma, and then we talk about how are they healing. And again, everyone is different. So that's another thing to say, is that within our family, we started healing differently. And so I tell people, inside your own family, you're going to heal differently, and have communication about that, and allow everyone their own path. I say, as long as it's not harmful to themselves or to someone else.
You find the communication to be hard at first, and then, because I think you all realize you're going through similar things in your own way, the communication might get easier between each other.
Yes, it's always hard at first because you're all reeling from something you had no control over typically. Or you could be reeling, in our case, it's happened suddenly and violently. And so that's what I can speak to. I know that some people have experienced a family member with a long case and long-term cancer or Lou Gehrig's disease. I mean, long drawn out processes. And so you have maybe more time to have some communication about preparing. And we had none of that. Our lives were suddenly, drastically, violently altered and shattered.
Right.
And so we were reeling from that. What helped so quickly, Bob, was to have other people come into our home and start the communication. So they would ask us questions, just easy questions, like, will you eat pasta tonight? Or the pastor's going to come over. Is that okay? Or can I drive you to the funeral home? Right. And these things get you to start thinking about things you have to do. And it causes you to have conversations about what's going on. Right. And then when the three of us were left alone, about 10 days after the violence itself, it was after the funeral and people depart, and it was the three of us. We did spend a lot of time separately in our house, doing our own thing. I created things. I stayed busy and created and made myself busy. My husband did a lot of work outside. He stayed outside. He felt very much close to our son outside in nature. Right. And then our younger son went to gaming. He liked doing the gaming. He was 12 at the time. Or he, after a year, he found himself on the golf course, and that was a huge, good turn for him. Yes. So being in nature is certainly very helpful. But yes, we all grieved differently, and I'm a little concerned now that I've kind of gone off your question. The communication, yes. So communication. So I'm a communicator in the family, and I would say so.
Most mothers are.
I'm sure there's someone in the family that's a communicator. And is it hard at first? Absolutely. Sometimes you might want to communicate with Post-it notes, like with one word. I love you. You are loved. I'm thinking of you. Right. I know you're sad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to not be okay. Just small little notes to get someone's attention, especially a child. Yeah. And then I wrote a couple of letters to my husband along the way because I couldn't speak it without sobbing uncontrollably. Right. So I wrote letters, and then we would come together and we would talk. So yes, it's hard, but it's absolutely mandatory to help your family keep living.
And that's a tough age too, that 12 years old. I mean, it's, you almost teenager, and then something like this occurs. It's you definitely want to have that communication to help that transition, help that path. So very, very powerful, and very, it's wow. That's very, very impressive that you're able to communicate that way and grow through this. One of the things, through learning all this and the motivation, or if you will, the encouragement out of it, is, like I said, I think those steps, taking those steps, that communication, that talking. Do you find this similar to your wealth management business, where you got to take those baby steps? I know it's kind of an odd analogy there, but I was thinking, well, how do those two relate? And it is kind of, I see the piece of those tiny steps. Would you say that would be something that would be similar?
Yes. And so let me compare it to a couple of different things as well. So I did build a wealth management business with my business partner, Richard Boyer, and we co-founded that firm, Boyer Corporon Wealth Management. And at the time, when you start visualizing something big that you want to do, a big vision or dream, just imagine an elephant, and you're trying to eat the elephant, and you can't because it's too large. So I left that firm, and now I'm building another business called Workplace Healing. And it's huge and monumental. And the ideas that we have, we're so excited about, but we have to do one tiny step at a time. Okay. Now, to bring that into one more analogy, my husband just is signing up for a half marathon. and he hasn't run a half marathon since 2013.
Wow.
And he's a runner, but he hasn't trained for something like that. And so the other day he said, I really want to do it, but I'm anxious about it. And I said, well, it's so big. You got to just think about it in small steps, like getting it on your calendar,
Right.
Scheduling the flight. He has to fly somewhere to go do this. It's in a different location. Maybe finding a partner to hold him accountable. And that's not me, because I'm not the runner. I don't really like running at all. And so we broke it down in little steps, and I was trying to be encouraging to him that to not let his worry or anxiety halt him from moving forward, but to write it down in pieces. Like if this is what I want to accomplish, if someone says, I want our family back together again.
Right.
Okay. You have to give yourself permission that it's not going to look the same.
Yeah.
Okay. First, it's not going to look the same. Not. And so maybe what you say is, I want my family members to individually be healthy. So if Lynn, my husband, is individually healthy, what does that look like for him? Mm-hmm. If Lucas, my younger son, is individually healthy, what does that look like for him? And then myself, what is that? And you have a conversation about that with them. And then you work at it one little piece at a time. It's been 7 years, Bob. And I want you to know my birthday's this week. And it's been a really emotional week, because I'm going to have another birthday. And my dad and son have not had birthdays for 7 years. Yeah. And so I get emotional about it.
That's understandable.
I'm upset.
As you're saying that,
it's still, so I don't want people to think that because I can smile and because I can say, oh, I'm building this company and our family's doing this, it sucks. It's hard. It is hard work. Yeah. But give yourself permission, one day at a time, to have bad days, to have good hours, to have bad hours, and find, here's something so key I haven't said yet. If there are people that are in your life that are toxic, you have to get them out of your life. You really have to consider, what is the most healthy thing for you? Is it yoga? Okay. Is it meditation? Is it scriptures? Is it walking every day? Find those things and give yourself the permission to have access to them.
Right. And that's critical too, for people to understand, even if you haven't gone through a traumatic event like this, the toxicity of bad people in your life doesn't work well. And you need to understand your value as a person, that you can avoid that, delete those from your life, so that you can grow and be that better person. It's just so much more, it's healthier for you. And like you said, for your mindset, even go outside and enjoy that, the outdoors, the blue sky, the sun, if you see the sun more often. You need that. You definitely need that. So
those are all very good recommendations. I love those.
I always tell people, even, because your day is going to go haywire. Take a moment, go outside and watch it, look at the dandelion breaking through the crack in the sidewalk, or, notice the trees, just enjoy, I'm in down St. Pete, Florida. And so the heat and the sunshine, and I can always go outside and something's green. I love that. The heat isn't always my favorite, but hey, it comes with the territory. It's better than shoveling snow. So
right. I want to interject that just recently some caterpillars climbed up a plant we had out in the backyard, and one of them formed in a chrysalis. And I've been watching this butterfly go into the chrysalis, and now it's about to go into be a butterfly. So the chrysalis was all green, and then now it's dark, and so almost every hour now I go out and look at it, because I'm not sure when it will flutter away, and I'm hoping I don't miss that. But if that's, watch nature, watch life happen, and that reminds us, as you said, the sun always comes up, and
might be behind some clouds, but it's always there.
That it's always there. Yes, it's always there. And that nature helps us understand that, and it grounds us. Just standing on the earth, on the dirt in your backyard, in your front yard, wherever you can, in a green space if possible. It really is very grounding.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And it's interesting, because I was looking through some of your bios and some of the other information on about your book and so forth. And you talk about God winks. Can you explain that to us? Because I
Yes.
think that's great. I could just see God, kind of doing that to you. And it's like, hey, if you can't explain that for us.
Yes. So specifically, I have to give credit to, there is a book called God Winks, and I don't remember right now the name of the author, but a friend of mine gave me a book called God Winks right after Reet and Dad lost their lives. And so, yeah, so if any of your listeners are interested in that, there is a book called God Winks. I did not write that book.
Okay.
So I was introduced to them as God Winks, and I call them messages too. So frequently you'll hear me say God Winks or God Messages, and I'll call them messages. I started getting messages from heaven immediately. And one of them was that as I found my dad in the parking lot, I heard the words, "Your father's in heaven, go find Reed." So this was clear as day. And I was so scared of that. I'm like, what is that? But now I've become accustomed to things happening. And so I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to take my bracelet off so you can see it. So I have a tattoo that is a yellow butterfly.
Oh,
so
cool.
That's why the chrysalis is super cool.
Yeah.
So I have a yellow butterfly tattooed on my wrist so that I can see it. And the reason I got a yellow butterfly tattooed on my wrist, it's the only tattoo I have. And about 3 days after, maybe 4 days after Reet and Dad's murder, I was sitting on the back porch. We were in Kansas. I was sitting on our back porch, looking at nature, I was crying.
Yeah.
I was journaling. And I looked up and I saw a yellow butterfly fly by. And then it looked like it went around again. And then again, and then again. And I thought, okay, well, then a day or two later, I saw a yellow butterfly again. And Bob, the yellow butterfly is just like a staple in my life now. And sometimes I'll ask for a yellow butterfly. Sometimes I'll say, okay, I really, really need it. Can you please show me a yellow butterfly? And one time when I did that, I was in an airport and this young family was in front of me and I was getting ready to travel and I hadn't traveled. And they took their little girl out of her stroller and they took her backpack and they put it on her back. So she's probably 4.
Yeah.
And they've gone through security at the airport and they put her backpack on her. And guess what's on her backpack?
Yellow butterfly.
A yellow butterfly.
That's
so
cool.
They don't always come floating in the air.
Yeah.
They come in different places. Or maybe I could be passing a bookstore and see a book that somebody put a yellow butterfly on their book. But I will find those and I look for them. Every day I say, bring me the messages. I'm open to the messages.
Right.
And that's what I think is important. I do think that when we look for these messages, they come to us. And I want to be clear, some friends of mine have shared their messages. One of my friends, her grandmother leaves her dimes.
Wow.
And she'll see dimes in very interesting places. And then another friend, like they might get letters, like her mother's initials might show up in a license plate. Or might show up in a billboard or in the same, way. So it's just being aware and knowing we're not alone.
Wow.
We're not alone. And there are always spirits with us helping us on our journey.
That's great. That's a great message for people to remember. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for what you've been offering. Where can people find out more about you, Mindy, so they can follow you and get in touch with you?
Thank you, Bob. So it's pretty easy. It's mindycorporon.com. It's mindycorporon.com. So I always say my name is all O's, corporon.com.
Okay.
And pretty much everything on my website will lead you to anything else I do. You were so nice to mention the Faith Always Wins Foundation. And we put on an event called 7 Days, Make a Ripple, Change the World. So that you can find those links. You can find a link to Workplace Healing, the new company that I'm opening. And I have a podcast and blogs and like you, I'm using my experiences in life to inspire people, to gather people together, to shine a light on peace.
And that's great. And that's what we want to remember that. And if you have things that you've been through, get a hold of Mindy and see, follow her, see what she's about. Mindy, I want to say thank you again for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for your time today. And I, it's just, you're a light. You really are a light for our society. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a good one.
You too.
Thanks.